No. The defense is wrong.
Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys.
Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. I'm Rob, this is Liam, and this week we watched My Cousin Vinny, a film about two youths arrested for a crime they didn't commit. Thrust into a situation where they have no way out, they turn to the lawyer of the family, Cousin Vinny. There's only one problem. Vinny has never been to trial before. So can Vinny, or Jerry Gallo, or Jerry Callow, stay one step ahead of the judge, long enough to prove once and for all that the defense is wrong, and get the Karate Kid and his whiny friend off on a technicality, and defeat Superman's boss in the trial of the century? Let's find out, shall we? Now, I've seen this film many times, and I love this film. I still said to you last week, this film is a favourite of mine. It's the best, in my opinion, courtroom drama. But
that's a bold statement for sure, but yeah, sure.
I've never seen it.
I mean, when I say I'd seen it, you know, we've run across these films a few times where I say I feel like I've seen most of it. But when I say I've seen most of it, like I saw it like 25 years ago. Okay. And I remember kind of just like a few moments, and I knew Joe Pesci and Marisa Tomei and stuff was in it, and obviously, Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid. But yeah, going back and watching it, the majority, it felt like a new movie largely. Yeah. But that was the thing that stood out to me. It's like the first half of the film kind of feels like a very much a 90s comedy, especially with the soundtrack, which I think is the film's weakest element. A lot of films, basically, if you go back to kind of comedies from the early 90s, they all sound like Kindergarten Cop. That's just one of the things that happens. And when you're watching this, you can actually think, oh, it's quite a broad comedy. And in some respects, it is. But then all of a sudden, the F-bombs start getting dropped. Yeah. And you realize it's like it's oddly shocking because people don't make these movies anymore. Like what this reminded me of, and I know it's not the same setup, but in terms of tone, something like Get Shorty. These kind of films where it's like, oh, it's a broad comedy, but with legitimately adult themes. And the other thing, to get around to your initial point, is the fact that once you get past that broad comedy and the culture clash, which is quite prevalent at the start of the film, this film is actually at its best when it is being a quite serious courtroom drama. Sure, the laughs remain, but by the end, I'm just like, oh, this is an oddly compelling courtroom drama.
Yeah, the way he cross-examines the witnesses and just throws all of their testimonies out is brilliant.
It is so good. It ends up almost montage-esque, kind of like a sports movie at the end, where he's trained up like Rocky, and suddenly you're getting the kind of rounds and the music kicks in and all that jazz. It almost feels like that. Only Joe Pesci is just tearing down one character after another. Yeah. But by the end, I'm just like, I was all in on the courtroom drama elements. Again, the laughs are still there, and it does come from Marisa Tomei, who's hilarious throughout the entire film, and I know you're absolutely in love with Marisa Tomei, and I totally get that.
I wanted to say, we'll get to everything in this film, but let's get to the elephant in the room, or the Marisa Tomei in Alabama, because that fucking woman is outstanding in this film.
Yeah, the fact that you referred to her as the elephant in the room is absolutely outrageous, but yes, she's incredibly, incredibly likable in this film. And yes, I can see why many people fell in love with her in this film, yourself included. I still am surprised, going back and watching this, as good as she is, the fact that she won Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars. Well, that is the difference, because when you look at this film, and I'll go into the fact that I think it's actually a three-hander, which doesn't include Ralph Macchio. But when you think of the two leads, you obviously think of Joe Pesci and you think of Marisa Tomei, and you think they're both as good as each other in many respects. You're like, well, why didn't Joe Pesci win an Oscar that year? And needless to say, the competition on the male side for best male actor was, who was he up against? Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman, Denzel Washington for Malcolm X, Clint for Unforgiven. And I'm just like, man, those are some big ass. Like, if he'd won best Oscar for acting that year, it would have been a bit of a travesty. But for Best Supporting Actress, what was it? Vanessa Redgrave for Howard's End, Joan Plowright for Enchanted April. I mean, it wasn't the strongest year, was it?
No. I mean, to win though for a light comedy is really good.
Yeah, regardless of we're kind of making it like light of the fact that the competition that year wasn't of a particularly high standard, but you just don't get it, do you? I can't think of many examples where, especially as we said, like this is being quite a broad comedy, where she would have won Best Supporting Actress back in, 1992, whatever it was.
Yeah, 92, yeah.
Yeah. No,
we get to the point as well.
Insane.
You said Joe Pesci was up against a lot of
big names.
Yeah. I mean,
he wasn't up against. I don't think he got an Oscar nomination, did he?
No.
To be clear.
But he at least deserved the nomination for all the men that wanted to be with a woman 22 years younger than him. He was 49. She was 27 when they filmed this.
Well, yeah. There's the age difference. There's the hotness difference. There's so many. There's the massive height difference. And that is one of the things that this film does so well. And it speaks to the quality of both Marisa Tomei and Joe Pesci, that when this film started, I was like, Jesus Christ, are we really buying Marisa Tomei and Joe Pesci as a couple? And bizarrely, I asked that of my wife like 20 minutes in, and she just went, yeah, I'd buy it. And I was like, all of a sudden I thought about it, I was like, wait, I kind of do as well. And by the end of the film, you're not questioning. You're like, yeah, they feel, I think it's because you have all those moments in the hotel room, at the log cabin and stuff like that, when they're just kind of having Barneys and they feel like a natural couple, and you forget about the age difference and the fact that she's so much taller, the fact that she's so much hotter. All that kind of blends into the background, and you're like, yeah, I do bizarrely buy them. But again, I think, and I could be talking about any element of this film. It speaks to the quality of those two core performances, which I think elevate what could have been an okay film. Like, the script's perfectly decent. It's directed relatively well by is it Jonathan Lynn directed it, but what ultimately makes this film is definitely those two and their performances.
I mean, those two are absolutely fantastic together. They so well. The fish out of water scenes that you have. I mean, I laugh to this day when they go for breakfast and they get a menu and they go, what should we have? Breakfast? And literally on the menu is breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yeah, and I mean, I watched that scene. I was like, I kind of, because we mentioned before, like, these American foods that we saw in movies when we were younger, and I got Twinkies for the longest time for me. Obviously, you can get them quite easily now, but when I was younger, I was like, what the hell's a Twinkie? There's still that element where I'm like, I kind of want to try grits.
Grits, yeah.
Yeah, but then I see it on screen. I'm just like, man, it looks pretty grit.
Dude, that was a beige plate of food.
That was a very, very beige, very unappealing plate of food.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the big draw at the start of the film is just, oh, look, it's people from New York, versus people from the South. And a big part of that is the third part of that, three-hander is... I was just going to say Herman Munster. That's very unfair. Fred, what the hell's his name?
Gwynn.
Fred Gwynn.
Yeah.
Who, I mean, this is his last role. But people who don't know, I mean, this is the guy who, most famously played Herman Munster, and this was his last ever screen role, I believe. But when people think of this film, I think they immediately go to Joe Pesci, Marisa Tomei for obvious reasons, but then they go to Ralph Macchio. But Ralph Macchio doesn't actually have a huge amount of screen time. What makes this film work are their interactions with Fred Gwynn, because that's what the ultimate culture clash, which drives a huge amount of the movie. And as much as, make no mistake, like Marisa Tomei and Joe Pesci, Marisa Tomei in particular, are completely swinging with the fences. I mean, no, the defense is wrong. It's easy to go. She goes so overboard. Oh my God.
I could not do it. I had to just have her say it, because if I tried to do that at the beginning, people would stop listening.
I was amazed you didn't. And there's so many, what is it, dead on, balls accurate. I think that was the moment I actually fell in.
I love the one when they're in the cabin and she's wearing this floral jumpsuit, which my wife loved, by the way. Yeah. And then she's just talking to him. She goes, my biological clock is going, just stamping on the ground, and then he just goes nuts. And he starts going on about, I got all this stuff on me. And she goes, well, maybe it wasn't the right time to bring it up then. Like, it's just so funny.
Well, those are the moments that make you, like, obviously she's like smoking hot in this film, but I feel like those are the moments that really make you fall in love with her as a character, and probably won her the Oscar. It's just, we've talked about, because Joe Pesci really is the lead in this film. She has a big role. She's the second lead, but he is the lead. There's a reason she's up for Best Supporting Actress rather than Best Actress. But what she does is she makes every single scene she's in memorable. Every line she delivers. And again, like a lesser actress, like, because again, she is swinging for the fences with that accent. Hearing me go, no, the defense is wrong. Like, that's not actually a million miles from like how ridiculous she sounds.
I always link that accent randomly when you say swinging for the fences. Have you ever seen Rounders?
Yes.
John Malkovich.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Pay
yeah.
that man his money. Whatever accent he's
Yeah, but that was more, that came across more mental, didn't it? Like that was the different. I mean, the thing is though, these performances with the right actress, they do work. And I was like, when I'm watching this film, what it makes me think of in terms of like a modern day equivalent is something like Lady Gaga in House of Gucci, where
Never seen it.
you know that maybe stood out a bit more because it's a really weird film. I know this isn't the House of Gucci podcast, but it feels like you've got like kind of three lead actors and actresses all in slightly different movies, and she's the only one who appears to know that the film is patently ridiculous.
Yeah.
And she never quite turns it up in the same way that Marisa Tomei does in this. But again, it's not as broad a comedy. But she puts in a similar performance, and she's similarly memorable because she's so likable. And, you know, it'd be easy to get caught up in the accent. But, man, Marisa Tomei is just so inherently likable. But you do have this kind of cast in this film of strange, like people who went on to have odd careers, like Joe Pesci, for instance. You know, we always think, I think most people now, when they think of Joe Pesci, they think of him as like the tough guy, you know, from Goodfellas, from Casino, stuff like that, you know, The Irishman more recently. Yeah. But you look at his CV, he's had just as many like really successful, super broad comedies.
Yeah.
You know, I know like, obviously, you know, a comparison would be something like Robert De Niro, and he had kind of comedies in the latter part of his career. With Joe Pesci, they always came side by side. I mean, this was released around the same time as Goodfellas and Casino, and he ended up doing stuff like, was it Gone Fishing with Danny Glover?
Gone Fishing was like 1996. I loved Gone Fishing. I thought that was really good.
You know, yeah, I like Gone Fishing. Obviously, you know, when people think of his most, you know, iconic roles outside of the kind of the gangstery flicks, it's Home Alone, like, you know, and Lethal Weapon. Like, you know, again, really going for it in that.
Yeah.
But it's not just like, oh, look, there's kind of, which I think we always had with Robert De Niro, where you're like, oh, well, there's a really talented actor giving it a bash at comedy and doing, you know, perfectly fine for the most part. When you watch Joe Pesci, you're like, no, he is a legitimately gifted comedic actor, both in terms of his timing and, as we found out from Home Alone, his physical comedy is just absolutely off the scale. And you could make an argument that he's as good as being a, like, you know, what is he? Is he a gritty, you know, kind of gangster kind of, you know, actor, or is he a comedic actor? You can make an argument both ways, I think.
He can travel through all those genres, can he? He does so well with them all. When you say about the comedy, right, there's the scene in this where he's speaking to the blind woman, and he travels all the way back to the end of the courtroom and he holds up two fingers. And it's just the interaction between him and the judge. When the judge goes, let the record show he's holding up two fingers. And then Joe Pesci of Vinny just turns around and he goes, right, Mrs. Jones, and only Mrs. Jones. And you see the look in the judge's face. When you're in the judge's chambers and you're talking, you go in, Vinny Gambini, I can't find you. Oh, no, that's because I'm Joe Gallo. Jerry Gallo. And then he goes out to Marisa Tomei and says, I was Jerry Gallo. That guy's won loads of cases. Yeah, but he's dead. Oh, shit. Oh, you were looking for Jerry Gallo? Jerry Gallo's dead. I'm Jerry Callow with a C.
Well, again, you know, it comes back to the actors and the fact that I think I mentioned at the top that I see this as a three-hander rather than a two-hander. And the big part of it is Fred Gwynne, who I think is so good in this. And he does provide, obviously, the alternative to the East Coast.
He's the straight man. He is definitely the straight man.
He is the straight man. Yeah. But again, you're talking about a guy who's famously, you know, plays, you know, hundreds of episodes of the Munsters, you know, in a comedic role. And you can see that he's got those comedic chops, despite the fact, I think if he was just a straight man, you know, in terms of playing the straight guy, I'm not sure if it would have worked so well, but you can see that he's playing off Joe Pesci as well. Yeah. And of course, the fact that he himself has got the kind of foghorn leghorn accent almost, you know, it's not far from foghorn leghorn, the judge down in Alabama. Like, he, in his own way, is going for it too, which suits the movie. But yeah, as I said, like most people, when they think of this film, they think of Ralph Macchio, and I did as well. Going back and watching it, I was like, oh, well, there's Joe Pesci's movie, and there's Ralph Macchio. And I was watching it, I was just like, one, Ralph Macchio isn't in it that much. Two, why is he so dirty at the start of the film? I can't quite get it. It feels like he came straight from the set of The Outsiders and went straight into this.
I think they were just trying to ascertain that these guys have been on the road for a while as they were traveling to college. But can we talk about the two youths for a minute.
The two youths, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, Ralph Macchio, there's a reason he's this memorable actor. You know, like, even though he had a really strange career, because he was coming off like that kind of Brat Pack thing. I know he wasn't part of it, but he was in like the Outsiders, Karate Kid, Crossroads, My Cousin Vinny, which was a big hit, and then he just kind of went away.
Yeah, he disappeared, yeah.
It was weird. Like, his career just never got off the ground. And we'll get some Marisa Tomei's career in a minute. But when you watch it, it's weird because he's so good. However, I don't think the same when I think of Mitchell Whitfield as Stan.
That guy is really a complete and utter shite bag. All right, apparently they're friends. They grew up together. They both got scholarships to the same school. That's fine. Well, that's how you become friends. But he's willing to throw anyone under the bus.
Unbelievable. I think he knows what it's going to be like for him in prison.
Oh,
he's gonna be the guy walking around holding another guy's pocket. You know, he's gonna be that
whole scene about Vinny, where he thought Vinny was there to take his anal virginity, was, I mean, and that got to me a little bit. Not the whole anal virginity thing. The fact that like the two big parts of this film, I say big parts, are all to do with a misunderstanding.
The misunderstanding is stretched to absolute breaking point.
Like the whole can of tuna thing, tuna, however people want to say it. That whole can of fish thing.
Yeah.
Right. Is ridiculous. That would never happen in real life. That would never happen, because they would tell you they're arresting you for murder straight away. Like the Alabama guys are like, oh yeah, so you want to tell me something? Yeah, big misunderstanding. And then the sheriff even read out on the stand, he went, I shot the clerk. And he said it again, I shot the clerk. No, you could clearly see that he was distraught, going, wait, I did what?
Yeah. I mean, well, that is the thing, you know, almost the two halves of this film. I mean, it opens with such broad comedy, and I think they almost feel like they have to, because that element of the film, that premise, which, you know, the whole film is based upon, is so patently ludicrous. You have to accept, you know, everyone's just kind of like, wait, what? Oh, he thinks this, I think that. Oh, and everyone's just kind of wide-eyed. It's like, no, you're going to do 25 to life, or you're going to end up riding the fucking electricity in a chair, because this is the southern states. And everyone's a little bit like, maybe Stan is it Stan? Is that his name? Yeah. Maybe Stan's the only one acting with any sense. Like, you know, Ralph Macchio, Billy, he's always pretty chill about things. Like, hey, you know, we're gonna, you know, kind of East Coast guy. Hey, it's gonna work out. We're gonna get my cousin Vinny. It's gonna be cool. When Stan's like, dude, we're gonna go to prison. I'm gonna get raped, and then I'm gonna get murdered. What the fuck? And that is probably, although saying that, when they do go to prison, and supposedly it is a real prison they filmed in.
Yeah,
it's a really nice fucking prison.
I mean, even the jumpsuits are clean as fuck. Those white jumpsuits are the cleanest I have ever seen.
Dude, they're better than the clothes they were wearing.
Yeah.
100%. I was just like, no, Billy, Stan, you seem like you're doing okay. Like, they got their own room together. You know, that doesn't seem to be an issue. And I was like, as prisons go, this doesn't look the rapiest. Yeah. Admittedly. It's like, you know, I'm not saying you want to do 25 to life, and you definitely don't want to get the chair. But I was like, if you could get 15 years, you could probably ride it out without too much fuss. Although, as I said, Stan does look like he's just one of these guys who's asking to be raped. That's a horrendous statement to say.
Like, Stan would be passed around like currency.
Yeah, he would.
I do love.
He'd be swapped for a pack of cigarettes for sure.
I do love Bill's whole argument for getting Vinny, though. Like, oh no, I'm going to stay with Vinny. Do you know why? Because he argued against the magician once.
yeah. He's going to save our lives. Yeah. But like, beyond the fact that he's a moany bitch, like, he is the one character, and I think maybe it's a bit unfair because we are talking about, you know, even Ralph Macchio, despite the fact that he has limited roles, he is memorable in this, and there's a reason I remembered him rather than, you know, Fred Gwynn and stuff. But everyone is like, you know, they're batting at there's a really high batting average going on across the board in this movie. Yeah. And then you get to poor Stan, Mitchell Whitfield, and he's just okay. And you hear some of the casting what ifs for this. I mean, it's weird because this film came up in the press. Came up in the press, you know, really, like just the fucking 30s. Very recently, because Ben Stiller said it was one of his greatest acting regrets was that he went for the role of as Billy, and he just said he absolutely like flunked the audition, and he just said like it was a film he would have loved to be in. It speaks to like how highly regarded this movie still is in many circles. And I'm like, oh, would the film be better with Ben Stiller or Ralph Macchio? I'm not convinced either way. I like Ben Stiller, but I think Ralph Macchio is perfectly good. When you hear that, they wanted Will Smith for Stan, and I know we've had this conversation before, and I know the situation with Will Smith now, but if you got 1992 Will Smith in this film, I feel like he's stepping up to the plate. Like, he's not getting kind of like forgotten. He's not getting pushed into the background. Maybe he's too big a character. I don't know. But 1992 Will Smith has got all the charisma in the world. Like, he's coming off the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could see that.
Just starting Prince of Bel-Air, I totally agree with you. Him being in that Stan role would have been those misunderstandings, those things. Like when he's going against, when he's teaming up with the public defender, John Gibbons,
I'm not sure. I know people love him. I'm not convinced about him.
Stutterer. And then he just turns around and goes, "You're fired." I think 92 Will Smith would deliver those lines better. I guess it would feel more natural. Because all I could think of from when you're watching Stan do all these things, I'm like, dude, you're jumping shit so quick with everyone. It's just, I appreciate you're up for murder, but you keep making the wrong fucking decisions. And stop. And like I say it all the time. I've never been, and I hope I've never in the situation where I'm wrongly accused for murder. But,
yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah,
yeah, but he's just so whiny, isn't he? He's just
that is the thing. He becomes quite annoying, and I just don't think he's as good. Again, I keep going back to the point, but if it was a lesser actress, Marisa Tomei should have been annoying, and I keep calling her Marisa Tomei rather than by her character's name.
Go on, do it.
By Mona Lisa Vito.
Mona Lisa Vito.
What a name. I mean, I should have said that right from the top. I should have just kept referring to her as Mona Lisa Vito.
So Vinny's name? Vincent LaGuardia Gambini.
Which does play into his alternative career as a singer, which we'll get to in Facts, I assume, or Legacy. But
we'll get into a Legacy,
That's a whole section to itself. But yeah, the only issue, I guess, with casting Will Smith is that you're doing a courtroom drama in the southern states in the early 90s, is that you probably have to deal with the whole race thing then. Like, that would be a thing. Like, they're already judging them for being East Coast Americans.
I don't know.
So it's like, if they're doing the East Coast America thing, it's like, oh, you don't belong down here in Alabama. And then suddenly you get like a wisecracking, like, black dude as well. I'm not sure it has to be a big part of the film, but I feel like maybe you have to deal with it.
I don't know if they threw it, because I thought that when you go Alabama, you think of that time, the race card probably can get thrown up. But then you look at it all, like the deputies, the prison, and then like one of the witnesses, and a lot of that jury panel, mind. So I don't think this film was going to ever push that route.
Yeah, because in the end, it almost, as much as it's a culture clash, rather than it being kind of North and South, it almost felt like a kind of like a class thing. Yeah. Like, his big issue wasn't the fact that he was necessarily from New York, oh, you big city folk. It was the fact that he was dressed like a gangster, like he just did things differently rather than it being like, you never necessarily got the impression that, oh, he just hates anyone from the northern states or he hates people from the East Coast. It was just the fact that like Joe Pesci is so unorthodox and Fred Gwynne's character is so traditionalist, to a fault almost, that maybe that's why the film works. And, the fact that they do have those black characters to remind you that this isn't like, again, I think it would have been easy to kind of just mock the South, like turn this into, oh, look, they don't get them because they
did try the East Coast. With Stan saying about how they sleep with their cousins and stuff, and then everyone's
Well, again, those, but the jokes are never necessarily at the South's or Alabama's expense.
No,
it is just like, oh, they're both just different cultures and they deal with things in different ways, and and they do it more in a factual way rather than kind of digging into the surface, which is fine for a movie like this.
You said as well about the judge, for lack of a better word, judging Vinny, especially the way he dresses and stuff. Has Vinny got like a 10-inch waist? Because that belt was going down to his knees when he tied it up. That was that was a long belt.
Yeah, it really was. And we'll put part of that down to, questionable fashion sense in the early 90s. I mean,
but he fit in. He was wearing cowboy boots. The shiniest cowboy boots I have ever seen on film.
Yeah. And I did like the fact that, when he comes in and he has to wear that kind of, the only suit he could find was the one from the secondhand store.
Oh, the prom suit or whatever.
Yeah. And he just comes in and it's a joke. But then, again, like, so much towards the latter half of this film, they really do get down to business then. They're just like, oh no, this is a courtroom drama. And it's actually been celebrated in many corners, this film, by professionals saying, no, this is, they actually go by, quote unquote, the letter of the law, I suppose. And, there are a lot of courtroom dramas. And I'm sure, if you work in the legal system, you can find it quite easy to pick them apart in the same way that my wife hates seeing labs up on screen because she works in a lab every day. And of course, she sees what these people, they go into a lab, something spins around in a machine and they've suddenly got the results. And she's like, what the fuck? That would take like 3 months. Nobody's wearing their lab coats. This is ridiculous. And I can imagine it's the same for people working in the law business. Jesus Christ. But yeah, supposedly it's all pretty much bang on outside the jokes. And again, I think that's what really makes this movie work in the second half is the fact that it does move relatively incrementally away from broader comedy into a legitimately enjoyable courtroom drama.
Following on from what you said, I can imagine the people in the law business, as you said it,
yes,
watching the scene where he comes back to the hotel room all triumphant with all the files. He puts them on the bed, and they probably all thought what Marisa Tomei said when it's called disclosure, dickhead.
Well, they do have, again, like the comedy net is never far away in this film, and I do enjoy like the running gag of the whole, the being woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning, from the 5 a.m. whistle, the pig farm next door, there's all these different things. The screeching owl, which supposedly is a real thing, like that's supposedly what it actually fucking sounds like.
He gets the biggest fucking handgun, right? Yeah. Which again could have been a 357 Magnum, the murder weapon.
Yeah, could have been.
He runs out in his Nikes, his leather jacket, his boxer shorts, and just shoots. Like he could have shot a hunter. He could have shot.
He's just shooting. He's not shooting into the sky. He's just shooting what's in front of him. And I know he's out in the woods, but again, you're rolling the dice there, Joe. But the thing is, as annoying as those things appear to be, the things that really annoy me, the things that would truly keep me from sleeping are the bed. Like you could see how springy the bed is.
Yes.
It bothers me, but not like there's nothing much you can do about that. You're stuck in this hotel, you're stuck in the cabin. All right, you got a springy bed. It would drive me up the wall. The way they sleep together is absolutely fucking insane. Like I'm all for the hug and roll. Like you go, good night, and then get to your side of the fucking bed. I know some people, as we would say in Wales, have a cwtch and all that jazz. But having someone like, face to face, sorry, I'm kind of doing the motions here on a podcast, doesn't really work, with them kind of pushed up against you. Like that's not how to sleep.
Because I like to be able to move or breathe whilst I'm sleeping.
Breathing is essential to sleeping, I would say.
That just feels claustrophobic as hell to me. Me and my wife are the same mind. You get the nice little cwtch, and then it's right, let's build a wall between us, we're done.
Oh, 100%. There's usually a cat in there or something like that for us. But no, I found that almost as distracting as Joe Pesci's eye tape. What the fuck? Tell me it's the goddamn eye tape.
Yeah.
Like what was he thinking? Like I get it. He's like 49. He's trying to convince everyone that he could be sleeping with Marisa Tomei. But there are 2 or 3 scenes in particular, and kind of these face tape things, they go under the hair, and obviously, it's kind of clear tape. And the idea, and of course, it's probably better nowadays, but this is 1992, is that it gently pulls the skin around your eyes to give you a smoother complexion and a younger looking face. It looks insane. There are 1 or 2 scenes where you can just, like, his skin is just being, it looks like somebody is behind him just pulling the skin on the back of his head. It's like something out of fucking Beetlejuice. It was so distracting, dude.
It always makes me think of the scene in The Simpsons where Bart has to go to his granddad's care home and help out, and he's hoovering the crumbs off his grampy, and he hoovers the skin, and he goes, Homer? Grampy? Homer?
It's not far. It's not far from that. All I can imagine is just one day he's looked over at Marisa Tomei and gone, my God, look how hot she is. And he's like, he's got crow's feet in the mirror. And he's like, Jesus Christ, I got to do something about this. Have you got a fix? Like, we can put some tape on your face. It's a rough look. It is a rough look. And he doesn't seem like the kind of actor, like Robert De Niro, who was up, supposedly, they did actually want Robert De Niro for the role, which I can get to a certain extent, but I'm not convinced this movie works.
I mean, once you look at it, Joe Pesci is the right person for this role.
100%.
He's unassuming with his height, like the way he dresses and stuff, and then it just turns out he is actually a very good litigator. You
Yeah,
know
but
about
you
the-
also have to buy him as an East Coast bit of a tough guy. And, you know,
Yeah.
you think about the scenes, like the scene that really sort of for me is the scene in the bar early doors. You know, every time he's in the bar, you buy him as a tough guy as well. But not just because he's Joe Pesci, because he has that kind of air, despite the fact that he's a very small guy. I buy him as a tough guy. You know, the scene in the bar kind of reminded me of the scene of Eddie Murphy in the bar in 48 Hours. When he just goes in and owns the bar, and you're like, oh, this dude's just all fucking charisma. Totally convincing as a tough guy, yet also super funny. And that's what it reminded me of. And that's what like really sold me for his character in this film.
You're on about Joe Pesci's masking tape around his eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about, which we love to talk about on this podcast, hair? Marisa Tomei's hair. Like, you're on about swinging for the fences. That thing was just like, I'm assuming there was about 40 or 50 cans of hairspray used per scene.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the fact that as ridiculous as the dresses are, as ridiculous as the hair is, she still looks smoking hot.
Oh, she's stunning.
she's so pretty.
We were on about crushes. Like we always go on about on this show, crushes through like when we were younger and things like this. This was a big one for me. Marisa Tomei, Jesus.
Oh, I get it though. Yeah. I bet you there's I can imagine you're not the only one who fell head over heels for Marisa Tomei in this film. The only thing I will say about Marisa Tomei is just the fact that she had a weird career after this, because you think she comes off this, she wins Best Supporting Actress, she absolutely smashes it. Like, she's so good, she's so likable. And you look back over her career, and she's had a very good career, but she never quite made it to leading lady level, you think off the back of this, she would have been given a shot. But nowadays, I think most people just know her as, you know, hot Aunt May from the Spider-Man movies, which don't get me wrong, she's totally hot Aunt May. She is very hot, and she plays Aunt May. But she's been in some big films like The Wrestler, Crazy Stupid Love, What Women Want, The Lincoln Lawyer, Anger Management. But she was never on the poster. You know, and she's never quite got to that level. And I can't quite figure out why, you know, we've talked about other actors and actresses on this podcast before, where they have a role, where they have their breakout performance, and then they get given their shot. And for one reason or another, it doesn't work out. You know, you get given usually 2 or 3 films. And, you know, if this is like, well, this is your shot. You know, if these hit big, you're going to be, you know, the next big star for the next few years. But looking back over an IMDb, she never really got that. She never got the kind of, maybe because all those roles were going to Julia Roberts back in the early 90s and Sandra Bullock. But you would think maybe she would have had her chance in one of those roles that, you know, those kind of, a relatively small number of actresses kind of snaffled up in the early 90s.
She went on to do films, and you probably know like maybe 1 or 2 of them if I said them. Chaplin, Untamed Heart, The Paper, Only You, 4 Rooms, Unhook the Stars, A Brother's Kiss, Welcome to Sarajevo. Like, since you've been gone, so that's from 92 to 98, I've said then. You probably, know 2 of them I've just said? Yeah.
It's probably right. And again, maybe it was a matter of kind of poor choices where, you know, she's just kind of found herself in the wrong movies. But I'd be interested to know, even with those films, like how many is she on the poster? How many of those films that have her name at the top of them? And I'm thinking probably not that many.
No, 1.
And it's just, like I said, it's just 2. It's one of those weird careers where she's done perfectly well. And outside of those, you know, the movies I mentioned there, she has been in some big films, and she's obviously having something of a renaissance thanks to, you know, I think she's found a relative level of fame as Aunt May in Spider-Man. But again, you know, she was never, you know, in terms of her career, was this the peak? I mean, which, like, I don't mean that in a critical way, because she won Best Supporting Actress for it, but it just never felt like it went above this level.
Wasn't this one of her first starring roles? Like,
it was,
out there as well. I mean, she didn't do much before this, did she?
No. And you know, you would think, oh well, like I said, I just think why wasn't she like taken into consideration for, say, The Net or something like that? You know, one of these kind of mainstream popcorn movies of the time. But, you know, I can imagine she was just maybe one of these actresses where I bet you she made it like the final 2 or 3, whether, you know, in terms of auditioning herself, or whether she was just, you know, I'm not sure a certain level you have to audition, or whether she was just taken into consideration. I bet you her name was on the list for a huge number of films in the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
But like I said, they were just like, yeah, but, you know, it's just, this one's gone to Sandy Bullock or whatever.
Before My Cousin Vinny, she did a film called Parker Kane. Cop turned investigator, investigate a friend's death. and uncovers a plot involving illegal toxic waste dumping.
Awesome.
Jeff Fahey was the lead actor in that, and she was the love interest. So, I mean, she did better when she went to My Cousin Vinny, let's be fair.
Yeah, like I said, she's had a perfectly good career. I just, you watch it in this film.
I know, but
I think if this was 1992, you've just watched this film. She's just won Best Supporting Actress for a role. You'd be quite surprised. Like again, we mentioned it earlier. Not many people were getting Oscars for comedies like this. She wins the Oscar. She's so charming. She's so likable. The film's a hit. You're like, oh, next 2 or 3 years, I'm putting a lot of my money on Marisa Tomei becoming like a big star, and it just never happened. Like I said, she was a star, and she's a name most people kind of recognize, but she never kind of got up to that kind of top tier level, or never really had the shot.
So many actors or actresses do the same thing, mind. They have their big breakout, and then I guess maybe some of the choices they make or anything else that happens, it doesn't work for them. And but again, so many actors and actresses do so well with just the supporting roles. I mean, look at Danny Trejo. That guy is dined out on supporting roles.
That is, but he's a guy who just kind of pops up. That's not the same as Marisa Tomei rocking up and winning a Best Supporting Actress. And he's an actor and a big part of it is his look and his voice. There's no two ways about it. He's got a shtick. I don't think anyone saw Danny Trejo and went, "Oh yeah, let's make him the kind of star of the next movie," outside of Machete Kills or something like that. Whereas I just think like Marisa Tomei coming out in 1992 has all the tools to become one of the biggest female actresses, sorry, that's kind of superfluous, female actresses, one of the biggest actresses in the world. And like I said, she's had a perfectly good career and it's still going. She's as famous as ever, arguably. It's just, I'm just a little bit surprised that she wasn't a bigger star for a few years after this. But hey, almost as surprised as the fact that her character allowed Joe Pesci to drive around in that piece of shit car. For someone who knows so much about cars, the fact that she's just letting him drive around in a dump just seems unthinkable. That took me out of the film.
Let's go back to the courtroom drama side of it, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that the entire case was just shot down because of a picture of tire tracks. And their knowledge.
The defense is wrong.
I mean, the defense was wrong. But even Joe Pesci knew what car it was, because before he brought Marisa Tomei or Mona Lisa Vito into it, he asked the sheriff to go hunting for that car. So he knew that it was whatever car they were looking for, Pontiac Tempest. So he knew as well. So he sent the sheriff on his way, and then he thought, but okay, I can't tell him they're wrong. I need a witness. So he grabs Mona Lisa Vito. I can't say without saying the 3 names. He grabs
Mona Lisa Vito for sure,
and brings her into it, and that whole thing then about like posittraction and everything. When who we haven't mentioned a lot of, Lane Smith. Mm-hmm. What was his name in this? I loved his name in this. Jim Trotter III.
Great name. It's a great name. He's like one of those, like kind of like one of those guys, isn't he? Yeah. Like you see his face, he's got such a memorable face. And you're like, I know I've seen him in loads of stuff. And then if someone's like, oh, like what? And you're like, I can't remember any of them. I just remember his face.
I said that I said it in my intro. He's Superman's boss, isn't he? He's Perry White.
He is Perry White. Yeah.
But
I had totally forgotten that he was Perry White until I looked it up, because I had that exact internal conversation where I was just like, what is that guy been in? And I couldn't think of a single thing, despite the fact that I love Superman.
Whenever we see him, me and my wife in films, I say whenever, it's not like he pops up every week. He looks exactly like my wife's Uncle Kenny. Exactly. So
I'm going to have to believe you on that. I do not know your Uncle Kenny.
So we just watch it. We just go, Uncle Kenny's back. Is Uncle Kenny on screen again? I mean, we are watching him in everything every week, apparently, because the way I've said that. But
he's good. Again, he's good in this film.
When he asks Mona Lisa Vito the ignition timing, and she's like, it's a bullshit question. You can't answer it. No, because it's a trick question. Like, I can't even do her Italian-American accent.
I love her. I mean, I could spend most of this podcast just kind of quoting Marisa Tomei in this film. But I mean, he does do that kind of like you get in these comedy films, because of course, like the issue is, as accurate as this film might be, of course you need to wrap shit up, and you need that big celebratory, like I said earlier, I kind of compared it to a sports movie. Like, you need the knockout punch at the end. And that is essentially what that is. It's the knockout punch. I don't think any kind of defense lawyer worth his salt would just kind of listen to Marisa Tomei's kind of, tearing this argument down and then be like, well, everyone, okay, essentially, we give up. I'm not convinced that's going to happen.
When she says to Joe Pesci, would you like me to explain? He goes, I would love to hear this. And you just got the judge, chin on hand going, so would I. He's sold as well. Like, this case is gone now. She is.
Yeah. Everyone's getting on. You're like, all right, this film's going to wrap up soon.
She's captured everybody's hearts. Yeah. She's there. She's loving it. Everyone's just like, yeah, we're done. Those two kids, they're going to go free. Like, it's just going to happen.
Nobody wants to see kind of like Marisa Tomei's character at that point cross-examined and, the kind of defense lawyer going into a dodgy past and stuff like that. And you're just like, no, that's fine. Let's just call it a day there and just let everyone go home. This is fine. Jesus Christ. But I know that's ridiculous, but the tone of the movie makes it work. But I think you mentioned earlier when he's cross-examining the witnesses. Yes, it's played for laughs, but I was so on board because I couldn't remember that part. I remember, vaguely what happened, but I couldn't remember like the details of the cross-examination. And watch Joe Pesci go like one after another, and then of course finding that excuse to get Marisa Tomei up on the stand and have her part of the finale. Yeah. Like it felt oddly organic to have all the big characters, rather than her just sitting on the bench in the background and going, yay, Joe, which I'm sure she would have said, yay, Joe, you did it, Joe. You did it. You're a real lawyer. Like, that would have worked because she's so fun. But the fact that they got her up as part of the film, I thought it was a great ending.
Yeah. It shows his cleverness as well, doesn't it? And the knowledge he takes on board. Like, they had a quick conversation about grits at the diner.
Yeah.
Like, the other things, I mean, anyone could have had those. Like, how could you see those guys through the window, through the trees, through the bushes? Mm-hmm. How could you see those guys when you're wearing milk bottles for glasses?
Yeah.
But that first guy was like, well, I was cooking breakfast. I had breakfast. I went there. I saw them. And then he said, I had grits. Well, how can you cook grits 5 minutes when it takes people 20 minutes? Well,
and really speaking to like the kind of the people on the bench, like, oh, I don't know, can you guys make decent grits in 5 minutes? Oh Lord, no. So yeah.
I love it. I'm a fast cook, I guess. You're a fast cook? That's all you've got?
Yeah. We're not buying that, dude.
Yeah.
But the fact that Joe Pesci kind of, in the background, amidst all the jokes and the cross-culture comedy and stuff like that, again, you buy Joe Pesci as learning this stuff. Like, you buy the idea pretty early doors that he fundamentally has talent and that if he commits to it and when he does, that he would be a good lawyer. Because, we've mentioned before, we'll keep coming back to Point Break and how quickly they serve those sandwiches. Yeah. He does learn to become a very good lawyer very quickly, but you never question it in this film. Because between him and again, even Marisa Tomei, where, she looks like the kind of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but she almost looks like, his bimbo younger wife kind of thing. But immediately you're like, well, she's not that. She's really intelligent. And when she does sit on the stand at the end and she delivers that kind of, that defense and she has all that information about cars, you buy it. So by the end, you buy her as being this absolute kind of, knowing everything about automobiles. Yeah. You buy Joe Pesci as a legitimate lawyer. And all this just quietly happens in the background. And by the end of the film, you're like, yeah, I buy all this. I think that's why it's kind of lasted so long in the memory for so many people. And for someone like me, coming back to it for the first time in, 30 years nearly, like it hasn't, other than the score, which we will get to, which does sound very much of its time, for the most part, I watched this film, I'm like, it hasn't aged a day. And, I mentioned earlier, the fact that they don't make these movies anymore, like Get Shorty, makes it an even better watch because you watch, like, why aren't we making movies like this anymore? It's such a shame.
It's so lighthearted. It's a fun 2 hours. You don't even feel the 2 hours. It's just
not at all.
Really, I loved his explanation, right, about how he learns things. Like, they don't teach us that in school or lawyer camp. Fucking
lawyer camp. That's definitely it.
Yeah, they don't teach us those. You have to learn that on the job. It's like when you take a distributor cap off, or however he says. And he said, "I'm gonna jail. Every time I go to jail, I learn a new thing."
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't be going to jail as much. Just FYI.
Yeah, that is something, I suppose. But again, it's one of those things you take for granted, the fact that all this stuff works. And I think that's the reason that it elevates itself, the fact that it's so memorable, the fact that it's aged so well, is because all these little elements, you're on board with. It's kind of like as we mentioned before, like if you have a great score in a movie, quite often you don't notice it. It's only if you suddenly put a bad score in, you'd be like, wait, what the hell? This doesn't feel right, kind of thing. It's all those little moments, the fact that you just buy into the actors, you buy into the performances, even the direction by Jonathan Lynn. I gotta be honest, like, I don't, this is a guy who directed Clue, which I know was a pretty big hit. Nuns on the Run, a movie I remember from my youth. He did one of the episodes of Ferris Bueller, the TV show, which obviously I never watched. That's insane. Distinguished Gentleman. What's that?
Ferris Bueller. Sorry, they're making a spin-off.
No, they did. There was a TV show.
No, they're doing it now.
Oh, really?
About the two guys that nick Ferris Bueller's car.
Oh, obviously. Why wouldn't
about
you?
Their day, like what happened to them.
Oh, so it's just a movie, but like what they did in the Ferrari for those 2 or 3 hours when Ferris Bueller's off singing on floats
I'm not
in
even
Chicago.
making this shit up. They're actually writing that script now.
Okay, I could get, why not, I suppose, because you don't want to redo anything to do with Ferris Bueller, as I'm sure was proved by the TV show. It was magic in a bottle. You've got the right director, the right cast, all that jazz. And yeah, if you're going to do a Ferris Bueller spin-off, sure, do it about the two guys and what they get up to in the Ferrari for the next 2 hours. Fuck it. I'm on board. But yeah, the TV show, he did Sergeant Bilko. I'm not sure if it's a film you remember with Steve Martin.
Steve Martin, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, Steve Martin's just kind of
and the super tanker.
Yeah. So these films, the whole 9 yards, that was a pretty big hit. So he's one of these like directors. Most people, I think, if you mention Jonathan Lynn, I don't think it's a name which immediately everyone's like, oh yeah, Jonathan Lynn. He's the guy who did Sergeant Bilko, right? But most of his films, like they did perfectly well. And I think in this film, I don't think anyone is suggesting for a second that Jonathan Lynn is the reason that this movie is so successful. But it's just another one of those elements that keeps everything ticking along. Everything's working in this film. Like, and it allows the kind of the real stars of the film, which are the literal stars, to really shine. God, sorry, that was very, that was on the nose. I do apologize.
Wow, dude. I
can feel myself walking into that sentence, and I was just like, I can't back out of it. I'm already here.
I mean, we can't cover
disappointed with myself.
We can't cover much more of the film, but we can't move on to the next section with stars shine. We got to do something else.
It's too late. That's what we're stuck with. I'm just going to have to move on to loves. The quicker we move on, the quicker we can all forget about it. Well, you should probably mention your loves first. Obviously, you're much more attached to this film than I am.
Marisa Tomei.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah,
absolutely. The courtroom side of it, which is like I said, I really enjoyed the litigation, the way he takes him down. Like he proves who he is at that point. He wanted to be a lawyer. He's good at arguing. He is proven.
He's good at arguing. You're good at arguing. You should be a lawyer.
That's their actual defense in this entire
film.
It is. That's how I became a lawyer. I was good at arguing against the cop until he admitted he was wrong. The judge said I should be a lawyer. That's basically his transition.
Yeah. I argued with magicians, and now I'm down in Alabama defending my cousin.
Before that, I was
who might go to the chair.
Personal injury attorney.
Yeah, well, that's another great moment from the bar scene when he walks outside and he sees a car crash and he immediately goes into that mode. It's like, was this your fault? Did you do it? Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, the guy in the brace. Did you do this in your home? Yeah, mate, you're killing me.
You're killing me. Just give me something to work with, for fuck's sake.
No, Marisa Tomei, the courtroom stuff, and of everything else in this film, I really enjoyed the interaction between Vinny and the judge. Every time they were together, it was so you can imagine they were just having a laugh.
Oh yeah, Fred Gwynne and Joe Pesci have so much, as much kind of charisma as both Joe Pesci and Marisa Tomei have. I guess that goes without saying. But the stuff with Joe Pesci and Fred Gwynne is absolutely fantastic all the way through the film.
I mean, my 4, 5, and 6 loves are Marisa Tomei, and Marisa Tomei.
Well, that's fair. I mean, one of my loves is obviously going to be Marisa Tomei. She is absolutely fantastic in this film. She's so goddamn. She's so pretty. Joe Pesci, mostly for his performance, but also for his collection of high top trainers. I think you did mention them earlier. They're fucking dope. He's got some amazing trainers. Again, at no point do I look at. For the most part, he's dressed exactly how you'd expect him to be dressed. Yeah. East Coast Joe Pesci, leather coat, all black. But then between like the cowboy boots and the high top trainers, I'm not sure where these have come from. But of course, I love high top trainers, and I wish I could get away with cowboy boots. So I'm all on board. Maybe they just had big heels on them.
They were the whitest trainers. They must have travelled in like cling film or something, because they were just the cleanest thing. Like they belonged next to those jumpsuits in prison.
Yeah. But in fairness, I've got a lot of very clean high tops myself. There's something about high tops, like when you get them, you just want to keep them clean. Like, like certain trainers, they look better, a bit scuffed up. Like if you get a pair of Converse, when they look new, it almost doesn't look right. You need them to scuff them up. The same with a pair of like classic Vans.
Yeah.
But if you get like a pair of Jordans, or I recently got a pair of Reebok pumps, high tops, which are very much from that era. I'm not sure if he was wearing pumps, but they're in that kind of wheelhouse. And I'm just like, I'm so scared to wear them outside because they just look right when they're pristine. And I'm like, they just don't look right with mud on them in the same way the other trainers do. So maybe that's why he's getting, I don't know. But yeah, I do love those high tops. And yeah, Fred Gwynne, his voice, the performance, the fact that, like, on a visual level, even, it's just fun seeing him stand next to Joe Pesci. Like, Fred Gwynne's like, what, 6'6"? He's a big old fucking guy. And Joe Pesci's just this tiny little dude. So yeah, like, the courtroom drama stuff, it's basically all the stuff you said. It's the three leads and the fact that as a courtroom drama, it's really good. So I'll stick with those.
And the trainers.
And the trainers, yes.
The trainers.
It's never three, is it? It's always like 7.
Yeah, he's gonna say. So my hates, I think we're going to agree on this one. Stan.
Yeah, that's my number one.
Such a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I don't know where like Austin Pendleton as John Gibbons, the DA, the whole stuttering thing, just it seemed to not work for me.
I'm exactly the same as you. I know I read like people supposedly on set were wetting themselves laughing and everyone had a great time and maybe other people love his performance. It took me out of the film. Like there's some patently ridiculous things going on in this film, but he felt like he came from a different film. And, there's a lot of broad comedy, but there's broad comedy. And then there's him, being a defense lawyer with a stutter. It's like, really? You're going to be a defense? Oh, God. You get it? He's a defense lawyer, but he can't really talk. Oh, my days. It was easily my least favorite part of the film.
Yeah.
Like Stan, don't get me wrong, Mitchell Whitfield as Stan isn't very good. I think the performance is relatively forgettable. He's a bitch for sure. I mean, we did make the argument earlier that maybe he's the only one really taking this seriously, and maybe those are the two extremes. They're both in the wrong films. Stan is taking it far too seriously, and then you've got all fucking stutters over there just going far too broad. So yeah, not on board. Stutters.
And finally, how many times they dine out on the same joke of miscommunication?
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry, it was just a miscommunication. I was just like, just you can stop on that joke now. All right, it worked with the. I'm not going to say tuna. I just said it. The can of fish. But then the whole like, oh, you're going to rape me in prison thing. Just just stop dining out on this joke, especially with the same character.
Yeah. Honestly. No. It's an issue. I mean, I could have easily picked the exact same hate as you, and I did for number one. And number two, I've got the soundtrack and the score, which I said, it's one of the few things that really ages this movie. Really puts it as an early '90s kind of comedy.
Can't wait to talk about that end song. I can't wait to talk about
God, the end song's insane. And I mentioned it earlier, the questionably pleasant Alabama prison. It was actually filmed in Gainesville, Georgia, in an actual prison. But, that prison did have a solitary section. It did have a death row. But I watched it on screen. I was like, it doesn't look that bad. When you have the threat of prison down in the southern states, you think, oh, this is going to be horrifying. But then every time I saw it, I was like, they seem like they're having a pretty good time. Nobody's bothering them. There doesn't seem to be a genuine concern of them being raped. I don't really buy that they're going to go to the chair. So that was my only other issue.
But the shite bags. You can tell they're scared, right? That bloody guard, when he goes, oh, that's death row in there. Yeah, we've tried to get it upgraded, but it doesn't cost as much. We had one guy last week who we had to flip the switch on him 3 times. Like these two guys are like up for the chair themselves.
The thing is, I mean, that's all played for laughs, but because I've seen the film, it just reminds me of the really disturbing ending of The Green Mile.
Yes.
Oh, dude, that fucking end. Yeah. One of the few films where most guys are just happy to admit that they cried at the end. It's on the list, isn't it? Green Mile alongside like kind of Gladiator and bizarrely more recently like Toy Story 3. Everyone's like, most guys like just pop out. No, I cried at that film. I don't usually cry. I cried at that, bro.
Never seen Toy Story 3. Hated Gladiator.
Oh, what the? All right, there's a lot to unpack out of that sentence, dude. You've never seen Toy Story 3, so you're the guy who hasn't seen Toy Story 3. The ending is miraculous. the fact that, of course, you step away from it. Like, well, they're not going to kill all the toys. That would be ridiculous. But there is a moment where it's so well written, so well performed, that there was a moment in the film where I was like, they're going to kill Woody and but like you just think they're all going to die. And I remember like in the cinema, everyone was bawling their eyes out. And the same was true of Gladiator at the end. How the fuck do you not like Gladiator? Russell Crowe giving one of the all-time lead performances.
Terrible, dude.
This isn't a Will Smith thing. I'm not going to get burnt on this and find out. No. Russell Crowe's thing. You must be the only person I've ever met who hates Gladiator.
It's so boring, and it's
wowzers.
Yeah,
wowzers. Well, we can't get into this. We're doing a mind like if ever a statement was going to absolutely derail a podcast, it's you saying that you hate Gladiator. Yeah. Jesus Christ. I'm sweating. I'm sweating. Oh my God. All right. So
this was the end of the Hey You Guys podcast. Tune in next week for nothing, apparently.
Let's move on to facts. For the love of God, let's move on to facts.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It has slightly derailed the podcast because I'm like, I can't talk about it because if I talk about it, that's going to be the next 30 minutes. So yeah, facts. Move on to facts. Okay, I've only got one, so I'll read the one I've got out in front of me. The fact that there was supposed to be a Bollywood remake for this film that never saw the light of day because they actually stopped it from happening. That has to be the only example of a company, and it was 20th Century Fox, ever stopping a Bollywood movie getting made. Because for those who don't know, Bollywood has apparently remade every single movie of all time, and I'm pretty sure they haven't paid for the rights for any of them.
They're making it into because only recently have they done like the Rambo remake.
Yeah. Well, the big thing at the moment, and I suspect that they have paid for the rights for this because I think it's a pretty big deal. But there's was it a Forrest Gump Bollywood remake, which has just hit the cinemas and it's getting quite a bit of press. But although the kind of the darker side of Bollywood, the low budget remakes, we shared posters for their takes on like shit like RoboCop and stuff like that. It really, most of these films are utterly ridiculous.
The My Cousin Vinny Bollywood remake, I would pay to see the song and dance of The Defense Is Wrong.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, as long as it's high budget. I mean, there's something I've tried to watch a few Bollywood films. I've gone to see a couple in the cinema. They're an experience for sure. And would I want to see a big budget Bollywood remake of My Cousin Vinny? Yeah, I kind of fucking do.
Right. So I'll do mine. The American Bar Association's publication, the ABA Journal, ranked the film number 3 on its list of the 25 greatest legal movies.
Awesome.
It's not just me saying it, mind. It's not just me saying it.
What was above it? Officer? Not an officer.
I don't know. It doesn't say what was above it. I'm sorry. When Vinny is trying to explain his real name to Judge Holler, he knocks over the judge's chessboard. This was accidental, but director Jonathan Lynn thought it was so funny and authentic, he decided to leave it in. The misunderstanding between Vinny and Judge Holler regarding the two Utes was in fact a real conversation between Joe Pesci and director Jonathan Lynn. Lynn is British at first and had a hard time understanding Pesci's pronounced New York accent. He decided the routine was quite funny and put it in the film. I mean, this seems like it's just going to be a lot. Jonathan Lynn thought this was funny. That was funny. According to Jonathan Lynn, the eastern screech owl in the scene in the woods was a real owl that had a little prior training, so it wouldn't be scared away by the gunfire. The crew got it to open its mouth.
That is unique training for a fucking.
Yeah, we're just gonna put this gun next to this owl's head and just keep firing it.
Yeah.
The crew got it to open its mouth by giving it little pieces of beef, and artificially induced screeches were added to the film in post-production. The owl's reaction to Vinny shooting the gun was authentic and needed only one take. I mean, the best owl actor out there, I reckon.
Mm-hmm.
The director says we got amazingly lucky with that screech owl.
That's a hell of a sentence, isn't it? We got really lucky with that screech owl. Jesus Christ.
Austin Pendleton, a real-life stutterer, originally turned down the part of the stuttering John Gibbons, but he did it as a favour to his friend Jonathan Lynn. According to Pendleton, he had trouble working in film for years because he became typecast as a stutterer.
Mm-hmm. Well, that'll do it if you are a stutterer.
You're just mocking this stutterer now. Do you know? So terrible.
I mean, well, they've really gone for it. I mean, that sucks. That sucks. It's like, when it's like someone's driving in front of you and you just cursing them out because they're driving like an asshole, and then you pull up alongside them and it's like a 98-year-old like little woman and you just feel like absolute dog shit. It's kind of an element of that now, so I do apologize. Also, I totally got the film wrong. I was thinking of A Few Good Men. That was what I was thinking of, not an officer. As soon as I said an officer and drama, I was like, that's not a courtroom drama. I was like, what is the one I'm thinking of? A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men. So the quote "dead on balls accurate" is a reference to an actual attorney named Joey Callow, from whom the name Jerry Callow or Gallo was borrowed.
Oh, that's cool. It's a great line as well. Dead on balls accurate. I'm going to start using that just randomly in like work meetings, like as to whether I do the accent as well. Like imagine that. It's like, are these figures accurate? They're dead on balls accurate is what they are.
Did you notice as well? Do you know what, when Vinny and Lisa are in the diner arguing over the pictures just while during the recess?
Yeah.
The mint green convertible drives past in the window.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Didn't notice that. That's cool.
I'm pretending I noticed that as well, but it's on my facts. I just.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't know it. I'm willing to admit it. I didn't notice it. But then I've only seen it once. You've seen it like 27 times.
In 2002, Marisa Tomei temporarily lost the Oscar. She was moving house and just lost her Oscar.
Of all the things to lose, yeah.
So, do you know who, like, you've already said a couple of people who were originally considered for the role of Vinny. Did you know Andrew Dice Clay was one of them?
No.
Andrew Dice Clay, the controversial comedian, originally considered for Vinny.
Yeah, it's a very different movie then, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not convinced about that at all.
Christopher Lloyd was considered for the role of the judge.
Again, yeah, Christopher Lloyd. I could totally buy Christopher Lloyd. I'm not sure about. Well, yeah, I'm sure he could put on an accent, but I think I just like Fred Gwynne in this so much.
Yeah.
That I'm like, like the core kind of 3 or 4 cast members. They're so good in this film that you start hearing names and like even Ralph Macchio. When I hear Ben Stiller, I'm sure Ben Stiller would have been fine, but I prefer Ralph Macchio. But those 3 in particular, like even like as I was saying, like Robert De Niro. I'm like, I'm sure it'd be fine with Robert De Niro, but it's just like it's hard to imagine it not being Joe Pesci now.
As you said as well, Ben Stiller regretted turning it down.
Well, he didn't turn it down. He just fucked the. Yeah.
Jim Belushi admitted he regretted he turned down the role for this.
Who did? Sorry?
Belushi.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's a big shout, turning down the role for this.
Right.
And again, it's a film that has lived long in the like. I was surprised to see it show up on Disney Plus, but then you watch it and you're like, yeah, why not? So likable.
Are you? Are we moving on to Legacy after this?
Yeah.
Good. Joe Pesci reprised his character for his 1998 album. Vincent LaGuardia Gambini sings "Just for You." Right.
Yeah,
now
that
moving
is
on to
an
Legacy.
actual thing. I mean, Jesus Christ, that is the greatest legacy of this film, unquestionably.
Yes.
The fact that the thing is, Joe Pesci used to be a lounge singer. Like this just didn't come out of the blue. That and it is this kind of weird period of time when you had these actors who were just like, oh, I'm also going to be a singer, which seems weird now. But you think of like Bruce Willis had numerous albums
Bruno.
around the same as Bruno. What's his name? Steven Seagal. With his jazz band Thundertrap. What the fuck? Like these were things that, and it was almost like he was just waiting for an excuse. But I guess if he's been a lounge singer, it's the crossover I'm not sure the world needed. I'm not sure if it.
Let me read the title.
Go for it.
Right. There's 14 songs on this album.
14.
God
damn.
Yo Cousin Vinny, Wise Guy, Take Your Love and Shove It, I've Got News for You, How Do You Like Me So Far, Robbie Hood, 21, Old Man Time, He'll Have a Go, I Can't Give You Anything But Love, If It Doesn't Snow on Christmas, What a Wonderful World, Yo Cousin Vinny in Italian, and Yo Cousin Vinny in Spanish.
Do we have any of these that we can play at the moment?
Yes.
So mentioning the soundtrack.
I appreciate we're recording this in August, right? But I have an excerpt from If It Doesn't Snow on Christmas, which I think we should bring back and make it a Christmas hit.
A Christmas number 1. There's always some bullshit which ends up being Christmas number 1. Why not Joe Pesci this year? Why the fuck not?
So it's 18 seconds long, so bear with me. But this is him singing If It Doesn't Snow on Christmas.
Santa's just as nice as he could be. There's just one fucking thing that worries me. If it doesn't snow on Christmas, how's fat ass gonna use that sleigh?
There you go.
It's amazing. And the great thing is he's got such an association with Christmas already because of Home Alone. And I love the fact that, you get some singers, like, they talk in a certain way, but as soon as they start singing, you're like, oh, you would never know they have such a different singing voice. You hear that. It's like the only thing which maybe has that beaten is like William Shatner just speaking as William Shatner and just putting music over the top. I mean, Joe Pesci isn't far away. It's basically just Joe Pesci talking with music on in the background. It's ridiculous.
Speaking of legacy as well, there was going to be a sequel.
Yeah. I can buy into that. It doesn't mean I'm glad it didn't happen.
Marisa Tomei chose not to do it. To the point where I think it was Vinny then traveling to England. Mm-hmm. Again, one of those fish out of water scenarios where he's got to do then the British legal system. But even to the point where it was like being written in 2002, mind.
Is this like the equivalent of our, like we were mentioning last week on the Prey podcast, that there was like, this potential for a new Predator template where it's just the Predator in a different timeline, fighting different, fighting knights, fighting samurai. Like this is basically the, My Cousin Vinny equivalent where it's just, hey, look, it's Vinny, but he's in England. Hey, look, it's Vinny, but he's in Japan. He doesn't get the toilets in Japan. It's like, then we'll do 17 of these, why not?
Again, I would pay to hear Mona Lisa Vito say the defense is wrong in Japanese.
Oh, yeah, the Japanese are wrong. I'm not sure if that sounds quite racist. But yeah, in terms of legacy, I'm not going to get that beat at all. I mean, I think one of the big legacies for this film is the idea of Joe Pesci as a comedic actor rather than rather than just a gangster. It very much plays into that. The fact that it was arguably Ralph Macchio's last great role. You can make an argument. Obviously, he's come back with the Cobra Kai TV show, but you look at his IMDb. He had this run of like great movies, really famous actor, and then just after this, it just went away. Really, really bizarre. The fact that they don't make this kind of broad adult comedy anymore, which is such a shame. And we mentioned it earlier, just a rare win for comedies in the Oscars.
Yeah,
you really just don't get it that often. Again, in terms of going into the scores and soundtrack, I'm not going to beat Joe Pesci singing about Fat Ass Santa.
Oh no, I want to go into that end song.
Oh, we will get to that. I mean, as I said earlier, like it does have that weird mix. Like it's the weakest element in the film by far is that horrible early 90s soundtrack. That cracker-friendly hip-hop we've mentioned in a few films. I always think of like Ghostbusters 2 when they were like, hip-hop is suddenly becoming a thing, but we're going to have like a song which is like, suitable for white kids in the suburbs. It has a bit of an element of that. But this, the soundtrack is by Randy Edelman. This is the guy who did Last of the Mohicans, The Mask, Shanghai Noon. So, you can make an argument. I don't think it's fundamentally a terrible score. It's just a score of its time. I think that's my biggest issue. And as I said, it's the one thing that's there's certain bits of it which basically sound like Seinfeld. Bang, 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 bang. There's a lot of that, jazz piano kind of thing. So yeah, that's my big issue. But I will let you go, sir, with the final credits song.
So did you hear any of the final credits song?
I didn't, so I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Okay, so you need to go back and listen to it, right? Because I was listening to it last night with my wife, and I went, wow, this is oddly specific for the film. It's like they wrote it for the film.
Yeah.
So the lyrics start off, well, he was a New York attorney about to take a southern journey into places that he'd never been. She was a brunette out of Brooklyn, fast-talking and good-looking, with a body that was made for sin. And she wanted him for marriage because the torch that she carried was hotter than the fires of hell. But he said he didn't need her, so she followed down deep into the buckle of the Bible belt. Right?
Did you just say, it almost sounds like it was written for this film?
Yeah.
Not almost at all. I mean, it is just, it was just a synopsis for the movie in music form.
I wondered why they kept saying Bible belt, right?
Yeah.
They basically just taken a song and changed the lyrics for this film.
Yeah.
The original lyrics? Well, he was the assistant preacher and the Sunday school teacher in the church that I grew up in. She was a looker from Atlanta, led the choir, played piano, had a body that was made for sin. She didn't care that he was married because the torch that she carried was hotter than the fires of hell. She had plans to seduce him. If she could loosen a knot in the Bible belt.
Oh my days. What I appreciate is like this is the complete other end of the spectrum from Body Count, which we covered a few weeks ago where you have a movie, it ends, and then suddenly you get this song which is so out of place, so just doesn't belong with the film. And then the other end of the spectrum is apparently My Cousin Vinny, where they just recount the entire plot of the movie, but in song form, which I have a lot of time for. Ridiculous.
I can't remember what I was watching. I texted you the other week, didn't I? Oh, there's a film
where the body count popped up again.
Because we talked about body count last week, and then I watched that film Day Shift on Netflix with Jamie Foxx. Mm-hmm. And the last song of that is Body Count, and it just pissed myself laughing because
Body Count from the album Body Count by the band Body Count. Just as I remember,
yeah.
Oh my god, I can't believe that exists. I can't believe it's made a comeback of all the films.
But I mean, the actual timing that I watched that the day we recorded Universal Soldier.
Yeah. The fact it was, I know people die in Universal Soldier, but I'd forgotten about Body Count. And when that film ended on the tone and on the note that it did, it really, oh my God, it felt like someone just run up and kicked me in the crotch. I was like, what the hell's happening? Like, is there a more natural fit in the Jamie Foxx film?
No, not really. I mean, there's a lot of people dying, so there's a big body count, as it were. So,
there is a big body count. So
bringing it back to My Cousin Vinny. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and listen to both versions of Bible Belt, because I can tell you I will be.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of homework from this, isn't there? There's the 2 songs from the end credits, and there's the entirety, 15 songs from Joe Pesci's 14 songs.
Vincent LaGuardia Gambini.
I mean, I am going to listen to quite a bit of that, in fairness. I have listened to a bit, but like having that Santa song, I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to... Like you said, though, like, why couldn't that just be a massive Christmas song?
Christmas number one.
Like, there's always a shitty Christmas song. I'm all for making that number one. The last section we always have is video games, and obviously there wasn't My Cousin Vinny video game. The only thing I'll say, the obvious thing is to take the Ace Attorney... Got the same thing, yeah. So I guess the question is, do you replace Phoenix Wright with Vinny, so still have it as a very Japanese, kind of 3DS style video game, but you just have Joe Pesci as Phoenix Wright? Or do you have Phoenix Wright trying to save Billy and Stan from the chair? So you still have it down in Alabama, but you replace, Vinny. I think you have to have Vinny. So I'm thinking,
have Vinny.
Yeah. So you just do it in the style of a Phoenix Wright video game, only it's just got, Vinny. And I think that's when you could lean into this alternative thing where rather than it just following the plot of the movie, you could have Vinny. You could have that culture clash around the world where you could have Vinny in Britain, the sequel we never saw. You could have Vinny in Japan. You could have Vinny in Singapore, in Borneo, shit like that. I'm all for it. So, I think that would be the perfect video game.
Yeah, I mean, I can't deny that. That's exactly where I had written down.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. I was just like, there's no... If ever we're going to have the exact same answer, it's for this. So
if we ever do another courtroom drama, it's going to be Ace Attorney again, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, there is an Ace Attorney movie. I think Takeshi Mike did the adaptation, but then Takeshi Mike is directed... I mean, how many movies has Takeshi Mike directed at this point? Well, odd way to end the My Cousin Video podcast.
My Cousin Video.
Video. Jesus Christ, I can't speak now. So yeah, let's wrap this up with, would you recommend it? What's the score? All that jazz.
So yes, I would recommend it. I really enjoy this film. I have enjoyed this film many times before. It's always a good laugh. And I mean, I recommend it. Marisa Tomei, that's all I'm going to say. Marisa Tomei in the 90s is fantastic. Marisa Tomei now. Just Marisa Tomei.
Yeah, I mean, she's gorgeous. Yeah. There's a reason she's referred to as hot, aren't me?
And my score, I really enjoy this film. I got shit, apparently, for giving Jurassic Park a 4. But Vinny's a 4 as well. It is a fantastic film.
Well, that's nothing, you shouldn't, kind of judge other films based on your crazy, kind of 4-star review of Jurassic Park. I mean, this is a 4-star review. I absolutely agree with everything you said. As great as Marisa Tomei is, it's the entirety of the cast, other than Stan, of course, and the stuttering lawyer. I don't care if he really stutters. It doesn't belong in this film. I mean, coming to it from a completely different position to Rob, in so much that, I hadn't seen it for nearly 30 years. I couldn't really remember it. It's aged like a fine wine. Outside of that, aforementioned score, it doesn't feel like an old film. It's well written, it's well acted. It works as both a comedy and as a competent courtroom drama. And total 4-star film. So even if you're listening to this and you haven't watched it, it's on Disney Plus. It's like a perfect kind of midweek evening movie. Like watch this on a Thursday night. Just
Yeah.
like you said, just a really enjoyable 2 hours of just great actors, good writing, competent director. I know that sounds harsh, but maybe it's the kind of film where all it needs is competent directing. But it's just kind of everything works in this film. So
And
very good.
Remember, if you're ever arguing with somebody, you've just always got to say,
No. The defense is wrong.
It's such a great line. It's such a great line. So yeah, that's been my cousin Vinny. Slightly different take next week.
it's your choice, isn't it? Next week.
It is my choice, and we're going to do one of the biggest movies of my youth, a film which I'm not sure people kind of still talk about nowadays, but Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I remember as being
the irony, the biggest film of your youth is about
ridiculous. It was one of the biggest films of my youth, absolutely massive back in the day. So I'm really looking forward to going back and watching this. And again, another one you can find on Disney Plus. So yes, thank you for joining us. Oh, sorry.
I'm intrigued because I don't know who is a bigger shitbag, Stan in this or fucking Ron in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
There is Ron. So yeah. Tune in next week for Ron. How big of a shite bag is Ron? But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one.
Looking forward to it as well. Cheers, guys.
So where can people actually find us?
Oh, well, people can actually find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. You can also drop us an email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. We like to read them out on the show, so please feel free to send them in. Any recommendations, just get in touch with us. We do like that. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing.
Cheers, Derry. And a big thank you to Alexander Ortolan for the awesome intro music. He has no media presence as far as I can tell. He's very mysterious, but makes great music. So thank you very much.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye.